Welcome to another edition of Development Update. We are here at Fore River Ave, not to be confused with Fort Point Road, which is another seawall project that is in the works. But we are here on the beautiful, newly constructed, nearly $2 million seawall project. It includes some drainage work. We're going to talk about that. It's a beautiful September day here. The tide is perfect. It's calm seas, and it's a little warm to be doing this. We'd rather be down on the beach. But we're happy that this project, which I think was extremely rewarding for staff to see this through to completion, is complete. We just put some finishing touches on this post-pandemic. And it includes, how many linear feet, Chip, of seawall?
About 900. 900
linear feet of really solid seawall work, some riprap revetment behind us, some stair access, all handicap accessible, I think.
No, this is not a handicap accessible beach. We have George Lane Beach for a handicap accessible beach in the town.
And this, well, we wouldn't even call this a beach because we have West Augusta Beach and we have Lane
Right.
Beach. But we do have access that was created here, and I think there's 2 or 3 access points along the way. Chip will get into the particulars of that, but by way of history, this I would say it goes into the category of long overdue. On the radar screen of the town for how long, roughly?
Oh, again, I've been here 25 years. This seawall was in very bad shape for that entire time. The original section of seawall was from the, I believe, 50s.
So Weymouth doesn't have the seawall inventory that a lot of other South Shore communities do. We talked about that in a previous development update. Just because of the characteristics of our shoreline, it's generally more protected than other towns. But we had 2 major seawall projects that were needed for a long time. And this was a little bit easier than the seawall project over at Fort Point Road because this particular project was on land that was entirely town-owned. So we didn't need the participation of abutters. We didn't need easements from abutters like we have needed at Fort Point Road, which has been a challenge for the last number of years. We got some good cooperation down here. It's certainly an improvement that enhances this neighborhood. It also included some drainage work. As I mentioned, it's a nearly $2 million project, and nearly $1.5 million of that $2 million comes from the state. That comes from the Dam and Seawall Repair and Grant Program. We talked about that in a previous development update also, but it was a project and legislation I worked on before I left the Senate. It was one of the last major pieces of legislation that I sponsored in the Senate. It got through on the last day of the session after midnight at the end of, I think, the 2014 session. And, or maybe it was 12, I forget now, but it was good to see that, you know, I saw it in the embryonic development stages, that program, and then coming in as mayor and get to see the actual application of those funds. Christine Howe is with me also in addition to Chip, and she's worked on the grant applications. This one, again, probably wasn't as problematic in terms of what she's had to go through with the Fort Point Road seawall project. And hopefully we're going to be doing a development update on that someday. Now that we have acquired all of the easements over in that neighborhood, I think, what, 32 or 42?
35.
35 easements in total, so we have 35 abutters who actually owned part of the road. But we'll talk more about that in a later date, and that's a much more expensive project than this. So people asked us, why did you do this seawall first? Why didn't you handle the one in my neighborhood? Because that one is also problematic, is a scene of massive flooding. And the reason was, and we would have liked to have done the other one first, but the problem we had was we needed the cooperation from neighbors over there. It took us a while to get that. I think we had 3 holdouts and then eventually 1 holdout that didn't want to participate, didn't want to see those improvements in their neighborhood or whatever, for whatever reason. But here we didn't have to go through that process. So this project ended up leapfrogging that project. And I think this was helpful for the folks over there too, because they came down, saw what the completed project looked like, saw really what the benefit was, and that gave some more momentum for people to cooperate over in the Fort Point Road neighborhood. But this looks great. We don't have to worry about DPW coming down here and doing patchwork like they had to, making temporary repairs. We know that they were responsive in doing a lot of that. This should hold up well. And with that, I want to have Chip talk about some of the reasons why this was done, what it means for coastal protection, infrastructure protection, and kind of the part that you don't see, Chip, was the drainage work that occurred here too. Take it away.
Right. Just to spin off a little bit on your comment about the prioritization and the sequencing of Fore River Ave relative to Fort Point Road, those two projects were sister projects originally, and they were going to be two parts of one project. And it was the difficulties that we ran into at Fort Point Road that required us to split them into two separate projects. And then this one got done now. Hopefully, as you say, the Fort Point Road will be done soon and next. Right, so as with any coastal project, there were challenges. The drainage system down here consisted of openings in the previous seawall, so that during a storm surge, the water would actually come in through those holes, but then it could drain back out through them. But we felt that a better design was to have a closed drainage system that has what are known as outfall pipes that take the water from the drainage system and just deposit it onto the beach to make its way to the Fore River. That involved us putting check valves on those outfall pipes that are specially designed for exposure to seawater and coastal storms. So we've got actually 3 outfall pipes, one that comes from C Street, which takes all of the drainage from the C Street area and abutting properties. And then we have a twin outfall design, one to take primary flows, the other to take the higher flows, and that takes everything from Fore River Avenue as well as a number of the side streets going up the hill here. So that drainage system is a major component of this project, and obviously for anyone that's been here, and if you guys can see, you may see in some subsequent video and photographs, pretty significant revetment was installed to dissipate the wave energy from major storms, and the seawall is set at a height that should protect this street and the abutting properties during, a huge percentage of the major storms that we expect. This, by the way, is the same elevation height as what we want to put over at Fort Point Road. The difference being that the road here is higher than what's at Fort Point Road, and you really can't raise the road at Fort Point Road, so you end up with a visibly higher seawall, even though the elevation is the same.
And that was a concern some of the abutters at the other project had in terms of the concern about impacting their view.
Right.
Right.
I mean, it's a valid concern for anyone who lives on the water that they don't want to lose that view. One of the best solutions.
But you also don't want to lose your house.
You don't want to lose the house because then you've also lost your view. So the situation here is that the land naturally rises up, as well as a lot of these properties have their primary viewing location on a second story. What we've been trying to push, and I know Christine has worked very closely with the residents as well as many town officials on our structure elevation program that is funded by FEMA. And that really solves 2 problems with one stone. That gets the structure out of the flood zone, and it also reestablishes a better view than they probably had before it was elevated. So I'm hopeful that over time more properties will be elevated and the issue of sightline and ocean view will become less of an issue. So back to Fore River Avenue. We started this project about 1.5 years ago, and most of it was done in 2019. We finished it over the last, early stages of 2020. It's been a successful project, I would say. The abutters here, as much as it is always an inconvenience when you have a construction project ripping up the street in front of your house, we're very understanding and very cooperative, and I got to compliment all the residents on Fore River Ave for putting up with this project, and I hope you're all happy with the results. It's what I sometimes like to say, you have to break a few eggs to make an omelet, and you can't really do road construction and this type of construction without a certain level of disruption.
But this really is an enhancement to this neighborhood, and it's got to be certainly an enhancement to property values down here.
I can't imagine it's not. Yep.
Yeah. With that, Christine Howe, our program coordinator, she's the person that's usually, at least Chip gets to get out into the field and take a look at projects now and then, in addition to the work that he has on his desk. But Christine's usually buried in a pile of paperwork in her desk, shuffling papers and making sure that from the funding perspective, a lot of the work gets done, and you can offer her perspective on this particular project. And I know that I have to say, the seawall stuff in some ways for you has been extremely rewarding, maybe this project, but extremely frustrating with the Fort Point process. It's taken a lot of your time.
Yeah, the seawalls, while we do appreciate the state providing the funding through the Dam and Seawall Repair Grant Program, it has been a little bit of a tedious process to ensure that we can get Fort Point Road, basically where Four River Ave is right now. We were fortunate to be awarded about 75% of this project's cost through the grant program at the state. The state doesn't have a cap on that program, but the highest award they've given is about $5 million. As Chip mentioned, this project came in at about $2 million, so we were lucky to receive $1.5 million in the grant program, which is a huge part of the project, and the rest was obviously town funded. But what's great about this is, once the funds are awarded, it's on a reimbursement basis. So, we can do the work, make it through all of the fun field stuff that Chip gets to go to, and then once the invoices and paperwork's ready, that comes to me, and I can work with the engineering department to submit to the state to get the money back to the town. As part of this too, this seawall, the elevation projects you mentioned earlier, and the 4-point road seawall is all part of our hazard mitigation plan. So every few years we update that plan and work with our emergency management team to ensure that we're addressing the critical infrastructure needs related to resolving some of the climate related incidences, through sea level rise or severity of storms increasing, especially along the coastline here. So by having that plan in place, which we work on collaboratively amongst all the different departments in town, engineering, DPW, emergency management, planning, conservation, we're able to then be eligible to apply for a lot of these grants and get this funding from either the state or, in the cases, the home elevation program from FEMA. So it's definitely a town-wide effort, and we're going to keep plugging along for Fort Point Road, hopefully, and see that project next on the docket through the Dam and Seawall Repair Grant Program.
Great. Well, let me use this opportunity to, in addition to thank you for tuning into this edition of Development Update, thank all of the town staff, those that are with us today, Christine, our program manager, Chip, town engineer, but everyone else who assisted you guys in making this a reality after, who knows, decades and decades and decades of this being on kind of a capital needs list. So one more that we checked the box off on, and hopefully we'll be doing a development update soon, just further up the coastline. So tune in for that, hopefully while we're still around. Thanks for tuning in.